Hello, and welcome to an Oblivion Remastered thing. After a marketing campaign comprising pretty much exclusively of quote-unquote unintentional leaks, the much-rumored Oblivion Remaster came out just a few days ago. I've played somewhere north of 200 hours of the original and about 25 hours of the remaster. If you're wondering if the remaster is for you, you've come to the right video. Before we get right into it, I want to give a quick shout out to my members, currently on screen. These folks go above and beyond to support the channel, and I'm very grateful to them. Being a member is never required, but always appreciated. Thank you. As the years drag on, I find myself becoming more and more of a retro gamer. Not playing the same games forever, but going back to old favorites and experiencing them with a more critical eye. There's a bunch of reasons for that, but they're not important to this video. My point is that, being a retro gamer, I am far from unfamiliar with the problems that can accompany remastered games. The appeal is easy to explain. Imagine, if you will, a version of this cherished game that we love with its creative vision entirely unfettered by the technical constraints of the hardware of its time. If the original spirit of the art is still there, surely it can only be better. But there's an implicit question being asked in there. What are the important parts that make any given game special? What parts can be changed or even removed while keeping the whole intact? What parts need changing? What parts should be enshrined as is? Exactly how much do you change, and what is the justification for doing so? There are many forms that a remaster can take, and they all seek to answer these questions with a new creative vision being added on top of the original. The worst remasters are money grabs packing the ROM and a free and open source emulator into a DRM wrapper with terrible settings imposed upon the player. And there's, unfortunately, no shortage of those terrible remasters. But the best remasters come in many forms, from simple but purposeful and considered emulation efforts to ground-up reimaginings that throw almost everything from the original game out, to a game that magically feels like how you remember the game being, even though it isn't quite one-to-one. And these different forms of remaster all represent the end result of different philosophies that govern the decisions made during the creation of any given remaster. When we imagine a game being remastered, we are asking ourselves what we would change, what we want to see out of a remaster. And we all come to different answers. So when someone who has played the original game asks, is the remaster good? They're not asking if it's a good game. Not really. They're asking what the philosophy of the remaster is, and trying to deduce if it aligns with what they want out of the experience. So that's what I'm setting out to answer. And to really answer that question, I think it's good to have some context for where I'm coming to the remaster from. After all art is interpreted through the machinations of our mind, colored by the ideas and preconceptions we bring to it. And in true Morrowboomer fashion, I'm going to talk about Morrowind before we get to Oblivion. Don't worry, I'll be quick about it. Morrowind, on the original Xbox no less, was my first Elder Scrolls game. I adored it, and I still do, and I played it for many hundreds of hours by the time Oblivion came out about 4 years later on the shiny new Xbox 360. I played it, and I finished the main quest, and I didn't really mess with it that much beyond that. I did the Dark Brotherhood and the Thieves Guild, etc., but I never really went back to the game over and over like I have with Morrowind. It just didn't hit right for me. I wasn't enthralled with it in its mechanics or its setting, and I have consistently ranked it as my least favorite of the modern Elder Scrolls games. I came into the remaster expecting to not really like it very much. But I do, and it's not because of the shiny new graphics. But let's talk about those graphics, because they're A mixed bag in interesting ways. First, let's talk performance. For the nerds, I'm running the game on a 9800 X3D, RTX 5080, and 64 gigs of RAM, with the game installed on a Gen 4 NVMe with a full 16x PCIe lane entirely to itself. Translation for everyone else, the game is being given every opportunity to succeed. But there are absolutely problems. Digital Foundry recently, like within the last 24 hours, came out with their tech review of the game, and they were not charitable about it, describing the Oblivion Remaster as perhaps one of the worst running games they've ever tested at Digital Foundry. I've managed to find a collection of settings where I'm able to consistently hold over 60 FPS, though still at a much higher GPU utilization than really seems reasonable. And while I am absolutely getting hit with stutter related to cell loading, I don't find it as impactful as Digital Foundry does. Hear me out here. The really egregious stuttering is mostly while moving across the overworld, and while that is a significant portion of what you do in Oblivion, it doesn't happen when you slow down to fight enemies or while going through a dungeon, which is when performance issues feel most impactful to me. You want that responsiveness and stable performance during combat especially. That's just my personal experience though. I've been able to mostly overlook it so far. Your mileage may vary. But I really hope that there are performance patches in the pipeline and coming over the next few weeks, because what's in here is really quite good. The first thing that hit me when loading into the starting dungeon was just how much better the lighting is. The way bounced global illumination from a sunbeam streaking through a crack in the ceiling fills the scene is gorgeous. The way volumetric lighting fills dark areas with mood and impact is beautiful. The darkness and moody lighting of the plains of Oblivion is especially dramatic. And the sunsets and huge draw distances showing overlapping mountain ranges fading into the distance. The Oblivion Remaster is occasionally breathtaking in its fantastical beauty, and I found myself periodically stopping just to watch the sun set over a landscape as the shadows climb up the mountains and the world becomes cloaked in night. Which is why I find it so incredibly frustrating that it's plagued with terrible ghosting and blurry temporal artifacting. This game is very pretty in an artistic sense, and it is buried beneath temporal this, upscaling that, and frame gen the other thing. Modern games just look bad all of the time now. And that's unfortunately just where we are in terms of the current real-time rendering paradigm. If you've noticed that the graphics have been changing around a lot in this footage, it's because I've spent hours tweaking settings in a desperate attempt to eradicate as much of the ghosting and blur and temporal fuzziness as I'm able to. I think I've settled on something that I can deal with, and I'll put the most pertinent options on screen if you want to use my settings as a starting point. Thankfully, the remaster is more than just an overwrought Instagram filter, and the audio is the next thing that really stood out to me. Many sound effects are either the original assets or very obviously mimicking the originals, but everything has been touched up and brought up to modern standards. But this wasn't done tastelessly. The devs were aware that sound is an incredible source of nostalgia, so a lot of old sounds were kept, with only mastering tweaks to bring them into their own space within the audio mix. As far as I can tell, all of the original voice lines were kept, with newly recorded lines being added in to increase variety. These new lines are predominantly added to the pools for idle and radiant dialogue, which really helps with making it feel like there's more than just one Bosmer voice. And speaking of voices, there's reverb throughout the game, which helps to ground sounds within the virtual spaces they inhabit. Especially in caves and dungeons, you can hear the room around you, and it's incredibly immersive. I'll play a sample for you now. And you may have noticed that there's an impressive increase to the variety of ambient sounds played throughout the world. It's not just variety either. All ambient audio is now spatialized, meaning that birdsong is no longer coming from nowhere in particular, but has a definite location within the 3D world. I'll play a cozy forest walk now. Listen to how every sound has a source within the world. I'll have more to say on the combat feel specifically in a moment, but the sound of combat has also been greatly enhanced. Sword swings are crisp and stand out in the mix, while landing a blow carries weight and impact in a way that the too bassy, somewhat muddy sounds of the original game can't hold a candle to. There's also pitch variation on sword swings and casting spells and footsteps and all those repetitive sounds, which greatly reduces how repetitive they feel. But the cool thing about games is that they are more than an audio-visual experience, and we've finally come to the real meat of the matter, the gameplay. Shiny graphics and an excellent soundscape can wow in screenshots and trailers, but once that initial wow factor wears off, the true worth of a game is more than just a tech demo, is in how it plays. And the remaster makes some changes. A lot of changes, actually, but they're all pretty small and hugely focused on quality of life and improving game feel. Combat has received the most significant changes, with enemies reacting to being hit and sparks flying off armor and impacts. Animations have been updated across the board, making enemy attacks more clear and easier to read. Coupled with increased movement speed, this means moving around your opponents is more effective than it's ever been, and you're able to dodge out of attacks and punish overcommitment. You're not immune to that yourself either. Attacks are no longer infinite, with animation combos that alter up the timing just enough that you need to be a little pickier about when you choose to go for another swing. Even though our movement speed is pretty significantly increased, there's periods of acceleration and deceleration, adding momentum to movement and making it so that it's always easy to get out of the way, if you're able to read the enemy's attack that you're trying to dodge. Playing as a sneaky bastard, it feels really good to dart in and out of range, whittling away at an enemy's health and gambling that I might be able to get one more jab in before I take a battle axe to the face. Yes, I'm playing as a stealth archer because I actually just like that playstyle. Arrows are faster and arc less, and for some reason never break anymore? I'm not sure I agree with that one. The game really is covered in tiny changes that all come together to form an experience that's more tightly designed and feels better from moment to moment. There are a lot of small changes, but I've seen it said that almost nothing has been done, and I think that speaks to the quality of what Virtuous has done with the Oblivion Remaster. It's still Oblivion. The remaster reveres its source, presenting a more polished final product than either the original game or what I was expecting the remaster to end up being. The improvements are, taken individually, minor in scope, but when taken as a whole have a subtle yet significant impact on the experience. A perfect example of the light hand that was used in updating Oblivion's mechanics is the lockpicking minigame. I am among the haters of the Oblivion lockpicking minigame. It's still not good in my opinion. Everything that I didn't like about it is still here, completely intact. But I gotta say, it's way more pleasant to interact with. Instead of starting in the middle of the lock regardless of how many tumblers are present, you now always start at the first tumbler. And, even better, you can use WASD to move the pick around. If you've never played the original game, or it's just been a while, you had to use the mouse, but it was this weird, mushy, speed-based virtual joystick thing. It was terrible. It was absolutely miserable to interact with. Just the spongiest, most imprecise feeling thing possible. It was something I actively avoided on most characters just because it felt so bad to interact with. Now, it's merely a not very good, but mostly inoffensive minigame. Another way the considered hand with which changes were made is apparent is in how Oblivion's much discussed leveling issue was handled. You may remember that Oblivion has set perks at levels 25, 50, 75, and 100 in any given skill. This still exists, but many of them have been shuffled around to make a bit more sense and represent smoother power ramps. But the biggest change is that the attribute bonuses you have access to each time you level up are no longer determined by the skills that you increased during that level. Instead, you have 12 virtues that you're able to spend on increasing 3 different attributes, up to 5 points in any single attribute. By putting this allocation directly into the player's hands, the need to obsessively track your skill increases during every level completely evaporates, and you don't have to build wonky classes with primary skills that you don't intend to use. I've been intentionally playing in a very naive way, building a class with skills I plan to use, not keeping track of skill levels or using power leveling tricks, and I have suffered no ill effects so far. It's excellent. Sadly, the game is not without its issues. I already mentioned the performance woes, but I have run into other small issues as well. In the original, there was a bind for a button that you could hold to change your movement speed between running and walking. I basically only use the walking speed when sneaking, so having this on a held input was pretty ideal. That bind no longer exists, and remembering to toggle out of both crouch and walk feels unnecessarily clunky. I believe this bind was removed in favor of the sprint button, which has a very goofy animation and honestly doesn't increase your movement speed nearly enough to make up for the stamina cost. Another negative I keep running into is twofold, but tightly interwoven. When looting a body or other container, the menus are navigable with WASD. I love this personally. I hope navigating menus with the hand already on the keyboard becomes standard. However, you have to use the Enter key to make selections on menus, which means you have to take your hand off the mouse, completely defeating the benefit of using WASD. And no, this cannot be rebound. So you might think, why not just use the mouse, you weirdo? Good idea, but mouse navigation is highly inefficient because of the constant confirmation pop-ups that require moving back and forth between the list and the confirmation, while hitting enter twice is way faster. Also, clicking things in inventory screens blocks further clicks from registering for like half a second, no idea why. And that delay doesn't exist when using keyboard input. It's very dumb. And before you write your comment about how petty I'm being with these complaints, who am I kidding, you already wrote that comment. But yeah, they are incredibly small and petty complaints. Think about what that says about the quality of the game. The biggest issues I can come up with, other than the performance, are weird entitled PC gamer junk? That's pretty good. And since I basically just want to rebind a couple things, these can probably all be addressed with a couple megabyte patch. Or maybe I can tweak an ini file somewhere, something like that. I have more thoughts on the remaster, but I want to sit with them for a while. Let the game sink in, let myself grow used to its contours. Expect more videos about it in the coming weeks. But after about 25 hours, I have a good grasp of what the creative vision was with this remaster. They wanted to preserve the original game for modern audiences, bringing asset quality up to 2025 standards while leaving it familiar. For veterans of the Oblivion Crisis, all of the weirdness, all of your favorite bits, they're all still here. And for new players, some of the mechanics are slightly modernized, and there's a help menu that can get you started with the basics of nearly everything in the game. And I think they pulled that balance off. I started by saying I did not start playing the Oblivion Remaster expecting to enjoy it, but I do. I want to play more of it right now. It has gone from my least favorite Elder Scrolls by a pretty wide margin to pretty high on the list. If you're interested in the remaster, I think it's worth it. It is a classic restored to a glory it never formerly had. That's pretty special. And what's also pretty special is this message from our sponsor. No, I'm kidding. I don't have a sponsor. I didn't even get a copy of this game for free. I bought it. But I do want to thank you for being here. Like I said, I've got more to say about the remaster once I've sat with it for a while, and there's plenty else I want to cover in videos besides, so like and subscribe for more if you dig the vibe. There's also a Discord linked in the description below where me and a handful of viewers have been sharing our experiences with the remaster so far, sharing screenshots, performance tips, wacky stuff that happens, that kind of thing. But at the end of the day, thank you very much for stopping by and lending me your ear, and, as always, have a great one.